On this Sunday night, crews in flood-ravaged BC race to repair and prepare. Water recedes in some areas, but more rain is on the horizon as hundreds of troops arrive to help.
The efforts of the Canadian Armed Forces and their partners will remain vital.
Special delivery. The first COVID-19 vaccines for children arrive in Canada, just as health officials warn of rising post-COVID complications in kids. And a curator for climate change.
Every collection in the ROM is up to me to interpret.
How an Ontario museum is looking to the future and our impact on the planet.
Global National with Robin Gill. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with more bad news for British Columbia. That province is set to see more heavy rain this week, even as crews scramble to repair the damage from last week's rainfall. By the end of today, more than 500 Canadian Forces personnel will be on the ground in BC, assisting with evacuations, rescuing livestock, and helping to protect critical infrastructure. And that help is desperately needed in the city of Abbotsford, which is now racing to build up dikes ahead of that severe weather expected in the coming days. Our Mike Armstrong is monitoring the situation in Abbotsford for us tonight, where officials have just provided an update. Mike.
Yeah, we've heard from the mayor who says this actually could have been much, much worse. He said that the city came very close to losing the vital Barrowtown pumping station Monday. As for the situation today, he confirms the floodgates are now fully open. The dike system is repaired enough that water is no longer coming through, and the pumping station is working at full capacity. We spent the day driving around the region to see what that means to people on the ground.
There was literally like whitecaps here. It was raging so fast.
Her street, she says, was unrecognizable. Denise Krins says between firefighters telling her to leave and the water rising, there were only minutes. The escape Monday was done, she says, in panic mode.
We had animals to take care of, 2 kids. It was really frantic. We forgot a lot of stuff.
It took the tracks right out.
The water has receded in this neighborhood, leaving behind it a path of destruction. It has also left behind some difficult memories. One of Clayton Liscombe's colleagues at this business shot video as the water came in.
I am totally stranded at work. Unfreaking real. I wish I could show you guys how really, really bad all this is.
Came up pretty quick because they were doing one thing and Murray said, well, a buddy of mine that works here, he said it came up like within 20 minutes it was up to his waist pretty much. So
now the return to normal life is further the lower you get. For these 2 men, home is a place still surrounded by water. A brother-in-law is the only person who's been back. He walked in hip waders to help pets that were left behind. On top of the damage to their home, they've lost trucks, cars, a tractor, and other vehicles.
They all under they like, you know, done. They're done. Yeah, write-offs.
Off in the distance, crews repairing the main breach in the dike, truck after truck dumping gravel. This is what that looked like from the air. The city of Abbotsford sharing video of the work on the ground. It has also shared photos of what is a growing military presence. By the end of the day, more than 500 troops will be in BC providing support. There's both a land element and an air contingent. 11 military aircraft are either in use or on their way. Now, this area on the map is called Sumas Plain. It feels more like it's gone back to the name it used to have. This is a photo of Sumas Lake, taken just over 100 years ago, before the dikes were built and before the lake was drained. For some, the thought that this could happen was there, but it felt as though it wasn't something to worry about.
Oh yeah, we know it's a floodplain, but yeah, you don't expect it really.
Driving around the region, there are more roads open today than yesterday. Not all of them. This is the Trans-Canada Highway behind me where it's closed, but we did come upon spots that were underwater 24 hours ago that are dry today. That said, a lot of these roads, as the water recedes, now need extensive repairs. Jeff?
Mike Armstrong reporting for us from Abbotsford, BC. Thanks, Mike. Today's weather is cooperating with those rebuilding efforts for now, but that forecast could take a turn for the worse as early as tomorrow. And for more on what to expect this week, let's go now to Global News meteorologist Yvonne Schell.
Jeff, a significant amount of rain and windy conditions, all courtesy of an atmospheric river, takes aim along the north and central coast. Through the afternoon and evening, flood watch, especially for areas near Stewart. The big concern inland, a significant amount of snow changing over to rain. We've seen some freezing rain across the region, but the drainage systems may be blocked or overwhelmed. Prince Rupert and Haida Gwaii also included within the flood watch. Inland areas with up to 80 millimeters of rain, along the coast 90, but the winds ramp up continuing towards Monday. Gusts between 90 and potentially up to 110 kilometers per hour. This system will work its way along the south coast. The concern, up to 20 millimeters, not a significant amount of rain, but it'll exacerbate the flooding situation along the south coast. And then a look ahead, we've got a series of systems, and the big concern to watch out for will be on Thursday, where we are looking at a significant fall storm that'll take aim along the south coast, and we could see additional rainfall amounts anywhere between 50 and up to 100 millimeters. Jeff?
Thanks, Yvonne. The city of Merritt, about 90 minutes northeast of Abbotsford, has also been hit hard by that flooding. Take a look at this new video from helicopter pilot Bradley Friesen that reveals the destruction along Highway 8, that's just north of Merritt. BC's Ministry of Transportation says more than 40 kilometers of highway was washed away by the raging floodwaters. The city of Merritt itself also suffered extensive damage. Its more than 7,000 residents were ordered to evacuate after the wastewater treatment plant failed on Monday. The mayor says work is now underway to repair the facility. Officials are also working to determine which areas of the city will be safe for residents to return. To other news now, and Canada's 44th Parliament will convene for the first time on Monday, and there was plenty on the agenda to occupy the new government. And our chief political correspondent, David Akin, who joins us now from Ottawa. So David, the government will set out its agenda in the speech from the throne on Tuesday. What should we expect?
There is plenty on the agenda, Jeff. The situation in BC, of course, will be the immediate focus, but what you will hear from the Trudeau government is a plan to, first of all, deal with COVID-19, and then second, to put in place plans for an economic recovery. In fact, a new poll done exclusively for Global News by Ipsos shows that inflation and the rapid rise in the cost of groceries and gas is the top issue that voters want the government to tackle.
For Canadians at the moment right now, and they're more concerned about cost of living and affordability because it's something that they feel every time they go to the grocery store, every time they go online to buy something, every time they even fill up their car at the gas station. They're really feeling it.
When Ipsos asked respondents to name their top two issues for the federal government, 33% put affordability and cost of living at the top. 27% listed the pandemic as one of their top two issues. Healthcare was right behind at 25%, and 24% said housing was a priority. During the election campaign and after, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau signaled that his government intends to address the housing crisis in many Canadian communities. The average cost of a new home in Canada has jumped by 32% in the last 2 years, and that's put home ownership out of reach for many Canadians. Trudeau has named Toronto MP Ahmed Hussen as his Minister of Housing, and the throne speech is expected to outline some specific tasks that Trudeau will have for Hussen.
What they're seeing is a public very concerned about what the future is going to look like.
Canadians will also get a sense in the week ahead about how stable this minority parliament will be. The Trudeau Liberals have been talking to Jagmeet Singh and the NDP to find areas of cooperation, though Singh is not prepared to give Trudeau a blank check. Meanwhile, the official opposition Conservatives are dealing with their own issues, including divisions in the caucus over vaccine mandates and over the leadership of Erin O'Toole. It all starts Monday with the election of the Speaker for the country's 44th Parliament. Jeff?
David Akin reporting for us from Ottawa. Thanks, David. The first shipment of COVID-19 vaccine for children arrived in Canada today. The plane carrying the first pediatric doses for kids aged 5 to 11 touching down today at Hamilton International Airport. The Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for children was approved Friday by Health Canada. It's a smaller dose than the adult version, and the regulator says that it is about 91% effective in preventing COVID-19 in kids while producing no serious side effects. The first Canadian shipment comes about 2 weeks after the vaccine was approved for use in children in the United States. Now, as we know, children have a lower risk of becoming seriously ill from COVID-19, but doctors in Alberta are seeing an increase in children hospitalized with a post-COVID syndrome known as Miss C. 61 cases have been reported in that province, and the illness typically comes on about 4 weeks after a COVID-19 infection, and in some cases, children become so sick they end up in intensive care. Heather Yourex-West reports.
Last month, 5-year-old Porter Nixon spent 7 days inside the Alberta Children's Hospital's ICU. Weeks earlier, the Calgary kindergarten student had been infected with COVID-19. But with symptoms no different than the common cold, he was never tested. A month later, he became sick again, this time with flu-like symptoms, then a rash. He was eventually admitted to hospital, diagnosed with multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, a post-COVID condition also known as Miss C.
We've seen quite a large number of cases, maybe last 2 months. Almost every day we have a child with MASC in the ICU, and often we have a child with COVID pneumonia as well.
Children typically become ill with Miss C 4 weeks after COVID infection. So it makes sense that weeks after the province saw cases of COVID-19 surge during its 4th wave, pediatric ICUs would be seeing more children sick with Miss C. According to Alberta Health, there have been 61 cases of Miss C in the province since the pandemic began, with 27 children admitted to intensive care. This 6-year-old Southern Alberta boy, whose parents have asked that we don't share his name, was admitted to ICU in October as well. His mother says her son had no symptoms of COVID-19, but an antibody test revealed he had been infected with the virus. Weeks later, inflammation in his heart was causing his blood pressure to drop dangerously low.
I don't think people realize that there is a real chance your child can get sick from COVID, and it's certainly, I don't think, widely appreciated.
Which may be why Alberta's Premier says many parents are not planning to get their children the COVID-19 vaccine.
We've done some public opinion research indicating that roughly half of parents of children in that age range are likely to get their kids vaccinated. So it's a much lower level of support.
Both Alberta boys have been released from hospital and are now recovering at home. While there have been no deaths related to Miss C in Canada, there have been dozens of children hospitalized across the country. And in the U.S., 48 kids have died, a rare but serious risk to children related to COVID-19. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
COVID-19 kept Americans home last Thanksgiving, but this year, millions are on the move. Airline bookings are up more than 100% compared to 2020, but those travel plans may hit some turbulence. That's because starting tomorrow, agents with the Transportation Safety Administration, or TSA, are required to be vaccinated, and many are refusing. Jennifer Johnson has more.
In the midst of the busiest travel week since the pandemic began, TSA agents are facing a Monday deadline to either get vaccinated or face the consequences.
There is the potential, if you do not have an approved exemption and you are not vaccinated, that you will lose your job.
An estimated 2 million passengers a day are passing through America's airports for the 10 days surrounding Thanksgiving. But travel experts warn of possible delays as thousands of TSA agents are still refusing to get the shot. Travelers are building in extra time.
We just know that we have to be here earlier and anticipate that there's going to be more lines and things.
As of mid-October, an estimated 40% of TSA agents had not been vaccinated. The administration hasn't provided an updated number, but says it's greatly improved. Whether the unvaccinated will be immediately fired is unclear. All federal employees face the Monday deadline, but the Biden administration is encouraging each agency to investigate before terminating.
We have a lot of employees who've asked for either medical or religious exemptions as well, and so we'll go through the process of looking at each one of those individual cases and making a determination over the next several weeks.
Vaccine mandates have already caused thousands of pilots to leave their jobs, resulting in record numbers of flight cancellations in the past few months. Experts warn the holiday travel seasons could be challenging.
This year it's going to be a lot more difficult to travel than it has prior to the COVID period.
The vaccine mandate comes as the Centers for Disease Control reports deaths from COVID-19 in 2021 have now surpassed 2020's total. No more shots! A quarter of eligible Americans are still not vaccinated, and new cases are rising again in 46 states. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Bieber boycott still ahead. Why the Canadian pop star is facing calls to cancel an upcoming concert. 5 police officers were hurt and dozens of protesters were detained in another violent night in the Netherlands. Dutch police, armed with riot shields, used water cannons and police dogs as they tried to stop rioters who set fires and attacked them with fireworks. The protesters are angry about government plans to enact partial lockdowns and tighter restrictions for the unvaccinated. And tens of thousands of people also took to the streets of Khartoum as Sudan's military reinstated that country's prime minister. Under a signed agreement with military leaders, Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok will head a transitional civilian government, and political detainees will also be freed. Sudan has been in a state of crisis since its longtime ruler was overthrown in 2019. Then last month, the military seized power and launched a brutal crackdown on protesters. Canadian pop superstar Justin Bieber is facing growing calls to cancel an upcoming show in Saudi Arabia. The Biebs is set to perform in the Red Sea city of Jeddah on December the 5th as the country hosts its first ever Formula One race. But in an open letter, the fiancé of slain Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi says Bieber should cancel to send a message to the Saudi government. Khashoggi was killed in Istanbul in 2018 by a team of Saudi government agents linked to the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And after disappearing from public view for nearly 3 weeks, the International Olympic Committee says that Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai has taken part in a 30-minute video call from Beijing. Concern had been growing for Peng's well-being after she made an allegation of sexual assault against a former member of the Communist Party's ruling committee. IOC President Thomas Bach, who was on the call, says that Peng said that she is safe and is asking for her privacy to be respected. Coming up, an aquatic comeback, how one endangered species is giving hope to Canada's fishing industry. Canada's fishing industry generates $6 billion a year and puts food on the table for thousands of Canadians. But a new report is warning most of this country's fish stocks are depleted or in questionable health, though there is one popular species that's making a remarkable comeback. Ross Lord has the details.
The Atlantic bluefin tuna is an endangered species. There are barely half as many bluefins as there were in the 1970s. But the latest stock assessment shows the popular species is rebounding.
The assessment was quite surprising for everybody. It was a big turnaround.
Enough for Canadian officials at an international conservation meeting in Spain to push for a 16% increase in bluefin quota. Even hard-to-please conservationists are encouraged.
Everyone, industries, scientists, and government has put a lot of work into this stock and recognized that it's very important. And when you do that, and when you stick to the plan, and when you don't go too far out of whack, you do see recovery.
For other fish stocks, like sockeye salmon, the struggle continues, according to the research group Oceana. The group says the Department of Fisheries and Oceans is failing Canada's fisheries, leaving sockeye and other species like capelin in Newfoundland and Labrador vulnerable to overfishing and depletion.
Only about 30% of our stocks we can verify are healthy, and we have about 17% that are in critical, and the department hasn't put in place rebuilding plans for those for most of those critical stocks.
Oceana says the government has made big investments in fisheries science and has updated the Fishery Act, but has not followed through with new regulations that are needed to conserve and rebuild stocks. It's a problem other researchers are also identifying.
The laws and the policies on paper, they're really good if only we could implement them. So this is usually where the problem arises.
Sumaila hopes the new fisheries minister, BC's Joyce Murray, will make the necessary changes to make success stories like bluefin tuna the norm and not the exception. Ross Lord, Global News.
Still ahead, how Canada's largest museum is making history by hiring a curator of climate change. Toronto's Royal Ontario Museum is the largest museum in Canada, dedicated to world cultures and natural history. And the ROM is now making some history of its own by focusing on the future. It just became the first major museum in North America to hire a curator whose only focus is climate change. Mike Trolet explains.
The Royal Ontario Museum's aggressively modern facade has become something of a tourist attraction.
Yet it's easy to forget how many people initially hated it. A museum, it was said, should be about the past. But that notion, says its CEO, couldn't be more wrong.
We're an institution that looks to the future. Our mission is to make sense of help people to make sense of the past, understand the present, and come together to shape a shared future.
To that end, the ROM has hired its first ever climate curator, a job Soren Brothers hopes will allow him to engage the public in ways his career in academia couldn't.
It's been understood from day one that I'm the first curator here with no collection, but the flip side of that is that every collection in the ROM is up to me to interpret in a way.
The ROM has always addressed climate impacts in its exhibits, how the dinosaurs became extinct, or more current issues like the threat to the giant sperm whale. It's now Dr. Brothers' job to take the conversation about climate change to the next level. It's a timely issue. Evidence of global warming, from wildfires to floods, isn't hard to find, and the COP26 conference on climate change just wrapped up with newfound promises to cut carbon emissions. There's no question, Dr. Brothers says, climate change can be scary.
Fear is not a really productive emotion. And so I don't want to just shock people or get people feeling scared about what's happening with climate change. There's definitely a fine line to walk there in terms of also not losing the gravity of the situation, the gravity of the reality of it.
But with climate change, nothing good will happen without first starting the conversation. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is Nipisiguit Mi'kmaq Trail in northern New Brunswick. The picturesque 147-kilometer trail is the only Canadian destination to earn a coveted spot on National Geographic's list of the most exciting places to visit in 2022. And it's easy to see why. Thanks for watching. Donna Friesen will be back here at the Anchor Desk tomorrow. Have a great night.